Advanced Residential Applications and Case Studies, Chapter 8, Cost and Income Approaches, page 6. Check your understanding. This quiz has a total of 3 questions. There will be 1 question per page. You must achieve 65% to pass this quiz. Start quiz. Number 1. Fannie Mae requires the cost approach on all appraisals of complex properties. True or false? I'm going to go false. It even says it on the URAR. Number 2. One of the strengths of the cost approach is A. It can be performed on any type of property. B. It is always more accurate than the income approach. C. It does not require work file support. Or D. All of these. I'm going to go A. And lastly, number 3. Which statement is true regarding the cost approach for residential mortgage lending appraisals? A. FHA requires the cost approach on all appraisals. B. FHA still requires the cost approach on homes that are less than 1 year old. C. Fannie Mae does not require the cost approach. Or D. Fannie Mae requires the cost approach if the home is less than 3 years old. I'm going to go a B. Not sure. I'm not 100% on that, but that sounds kind of accurate. Assessment completed. Finish. You passed. You got a 66.7%. So remember, number 1, Fannie Mae requires the cost approach on appraisals of complex properties. True or false? You said false, and that was correct. Number 2, one of the strengths of the cost approach is, you said, it can be performed on any type of property, and that was correct. And lastly, number 3. Number 3, which statement is true regarding the cost approach for residential mortgage lending appraisals? You said FHA still requires a cost approach on homes that are less than 1 year old. That was incorrect. The correct answer was Fannie Mae does not require the cost approach. That's the takeaway. Lenders usually don't care about the cost approach for residential appraisals. Fannie Mae now says on their forms that the cost approach is not required. FHA used to require the cost approach if a property was less than 1 year old. Now they no longer require it either. Chapter 9, Cost Approach Applicability. Continue. Page 7. Market extraction of building costs. You can extract certain building costs from the market. A reproduction cost of a new house means what it would cost to produce an exact replica of that house. You can get costs from a manual, but that technically isn't a replacement cost. However, if you carefully cost out a new house, that was built with standard current materials and techniques, it actually becomes a reproduction cost as well. For a property like this, for instance, a new house of standard design and construction, reproduction and replacement costs should be the same. You can get costs from a builder. After all, you're trying to get builder's costs, so why not ask one? The problem is you can't take the time to produce an exact set of specifications and then expect a builder to spend days on constructing an exact cost estimate for you. However, you can extract the building costs when a new house is sold. Assume you do a mortgage appraisal of a new house that has just been sold. You can go through and measure it carefully and record all the details of materials and craftsmanship. It's sold for $400,000. You estimate the land value by comparable sales to be $80,000 and the site improvements to be worth $20,000. How much did the house cost? Suppose the house had 3,000 square feet. What did it cost per square foot? The building improvements, after subtracting the land and site improvements, sold for $300,000. If there were 3,000 square feet, it sold for $100 per square foot. Are cost and value the same? Not necessarily. But if there was no depreciation, they probably were the same. At least it is a market-derived indication of the contribution of the building improvements to overall value. Is it 100% conclusive? No. But if you derive additional indications from the sale of similar new houses, it sure begins to form a nice pattern for you to analyze. Maybe these real local cost indications are more reflective of your local market than what you can obtain from a cost manual. Every time you appraise a new construction, whether an existing spec home or a proposed dwelling from plans and specs, you should gather that information and file it away. Every time you can get your hands on a sales contract for a new construction, study it and mine it for information. End of page. Page 8. Cost index trending. Cost manuals and computerized estimating services contain cost index tables that reflect changes in the cost of construction over time. These cost indices can convert known costs from a past time into a current cost estimate. This can be very valuable when you are appraising an unusual property. Maybe the subject is a one-of-a-kind, upside-down pyramid. You look at and start to sweat, thinking, I sure don't have comps for that. Then you come up with a building contract that the owner provides. It's 75 pages of details and says that the total contracted price by a reputable builder was $875,000 5 years ago. Wow, you just struck pay dirt. In the Marshall & Swift handbook are competitive cost multipliers that go back over 40 years. Of course, the further you have to go back, the less credence you might want to attach to it. Example: the contract cost for constructing a house 5 years ago was $875,000. The index for that time was 120.2, and the current index is 146.5. 146.5 divided by 120.2 equals 1.219. This means the costs have increased 21.9%. $875,000 times 1.219 equals $1,066,625. That's a pretty defensible number, and it didn't take too much time to obtain. Got a better idea? End of page. Page 9, cost to cure. An estimate of the cost to cure a particular item is often required by a client for the following items: physical deterioration or functional obsolescence, building code violations, structural/foundation problems, remediation of environmental contamination problem, encroachment/lot line problems, unfinished or vandalized home. Estimating the cost to cure deferred maintenance or functional problems is one of the most common problems encountered by a residential appraiser. For example, the estimated cost to repair or replace a leaking roof is often required by a lender before they will fund a loan. If an approximate estimate is sufficient, the appraiser could provide it. HUD/FHA, for example, requires the appraiser to estimate the cost of each listed repair in the appraisal report. However, a formal bid from a roofing contractor may be required depending on the circumstances. For some items, the cost to cure might need to be estimated by a qualified contractor. These things would include building code violations, structural and foundation problems, and unfinished or vandalized homes. When a lender is involved, they will often solicit a bid from a contractor who has experience with this type of situation. As the appraiser, you'll need to review this bid to determine its reasonableness. If you feel the estimated cost is realistic, you should use an extraordinary assumption in the appraisal report, stating that you are basing your value opinion on the assumption that the cost to cure is accurate. You will need to follow a similar process for properties that have soil contamination or other environmental issues. If the estimated costs to remediate the problem are known, these can be used to solve the appraisal problem. If the costs are unknown or are difficult to determine, the appraisal can be done using a hypothetical condition if it is considered appropriate. Under a hypothetical condition, the property is valued as if the soil contamination did not exist. A property with building code violations is another area that may need to be addressed. An example of this type of situation would be an addition to a home that was completed without permits. Generally, the local building and planning department will grant a permit only after it is completely satisfied that the addition was built to or has been brought up to local building code. In many cases, the building department will assess fines in addition to the normal permit and planning fees. It may also be necessary to hire an architect and/or structural engineer to produce acceptable plans. Some elements of the construction may need to be exposed by opening walls or removing materials blocking clear inspection access. If a foundation was included in the addition, the engineer may specify structural elements to be added or require correction of any construction or design deficiencies. Typically, the architect or engineer will provide an estimate of the cost to bring the property up to code and have a permit issued. The final item in this category is the cost to resolve encroachment/lot line problems. The costs to cure this type of problem would undoubtedly start with legal fees. Litigation is a strong possibility. One solution would be for the property owner to acquire a portion of the neighboring lot. If the owner of the adjacent property were cooperative and such a solution would be acceptable to the local planning and zoning department, with this type of situation, each property needs to be evaluated individually. In many cases, the appraiser is hired to help solve a portion of the problem, such as the value of the land that would have to be acquired to eliminate the encroachment problem. End of page.